The Wu Flu tyranny, which has been taking over the world over the past year and 3/4, has been, I believe, running out of steam. Now, you might say, well, look at what's happening in Austria. Look at what's happening all over Europe and such. Look at what's happening with the vaccine mandates Biden and whatnot. Look at booster shots. But I look at all of those things and see a bit of a different picture than many people. And this might be something due to my US-centric perspective. I mean, Europe seems to have it much worse than the US does. Same goes with Australia and other places of the sort. And whereas the US has some free states, it seems more limited in the whole Europe place. But even if you include Europe, I believe that there is a good argument to be made that the COVID tyranny has been hitting a stopping point. Not necessarily a complete stopping point, to be clear. They're still trying to push many different policies, whether it be booster shots or vaccine mandates, which are happening even in the US, with Fauci coming out and saying that you should get the booster shot because your vaccine is completely safe and totally effective, which is why you need a booster shot, because that makes sense. That is still happening, but I don't think it's falling on particularly attentive ears anymore. At this point, most people seem to be completely ignoring the COVID mandates, and if they can't, they seem to be protesting it. Just look at what's happening both in the US and in the rest of the world. For instance, Florida is now back up to its pre-pandemic numbers for tourists, a number which I personally contributed to as well. And this is due in no small part to the fact that they are completely open. They have a completely open and functioning economy. They aren't worrying about constant lockdowns or onerous restrictions on people's movements and abilities to do things like doing tourist attractions and the like. Whereas, take for example, California is not up to that particular metric. And this follows over into Europe, because where there is onerous restrictions, which is quite literally all over Europe, there are lots of protests. In case you haven't heard and haven't looked at it, which is reasonable considering the utter lack of coverage on mainstream outlets about this particular string of stories, everywhere there has been onerous vaccine mandates or other things of the sort, there has been protests. There are protests all over the world going on, with tens of thousands of people attending in multiple different countries all around the same time period. It is quite insane, honestly, to see how many people are pushing back on the tyranny, which just a year ago it would have been unthinkable to do, or unthinkable to at least see by many people. And the question at this point must be, why? Why is that happening? Well, I think it's a fairly obvious thing that many people forget, and that is COVID restrictions are disastrous. They don't work. I mean, people have talked so much ad infinitum about the moral problems of the COVID restrictions, the totalitarianism of them, or the authoritarianism of them, how they are restricting people's freedom and all of that sort of stuff. And that's a legitimate argumentative path to go down. It's one I've gone down on in many an occasion. And you've also seen some talks about the efficiency of it in a medical context. You'll also see me talk about the fact that most of these things are done and promoted through literally fake studies, are done through fake numbers and that sort of thing. All of these are legitimate forms of attack, but they miss something fairly key, and something that is missed on a lot of aspects, and that is that these policies don't work from an economic context. Understand that the reason people are still going to Florida and have gone to Florida now in pre-pandemic numbers, and Florida has a completely functioning and recovered economy, whereas places like California are floundering and having massive labor shortages and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, not to say that Florida doesn't have those problems, but it's certainly to a lesser extent, is because Florida has better policy. than California. Same goes with Europe. The reason that people have the time to protest, the reason that people are protesting at all, is because, frankly, they don't have any other choice. If you're being kicked out of your job because of onerous restrictions, if you are being prevented from leaving your house on a daily basis because the government has decided that they want to go for an utterly insane and, frankly, impossible standard of zero COVID, which many of these governments are at least attempting to do, while, of course, admitting in the backlogs that they are not attempting to do this, that it's not possible, then there's only one choice for you, really, because you don't have anything else to do with your time. Sure, you could sit down on Netflix and chill, maybe, but that can only be fulfilling for so long. It gets monotonous. At some point, you have to go out and actually do something. And if your only choice is to go out and protest, well, many people are going to take that choice. It is not like these people aren't productive members of society either. You could see this in leftist protests, where many of the people who are attending are not people who are employed. They're unemployed, trust funders, or that sort of person. But in this case, you have people who would normally be working and thus not have the time to protest, who, because of the government's self-same restrictions, have the ability to go out and protest government corruption and government authoritarianism, which is fairly an interesting backfire of this particular policy. And it's something that gets missed all too often. And I think this has led to a loss of momentum for the COVID tyranny as a whole. Now, let's be clear: it's not an overnight knockout. It's not as though that they have lost all momentum, that they have no power whatsoever, because they obviously do. But it's certainly a good first step. And if you continue to go on with the local takeover, if you involve yourself in civics and you continue to do the strategies which have now been proven to work in places like Virginia and places like even New Jersey, then you are going to continue to stop that momentum. And that is a pretty good white pill, and a pretty good white pill to leave us off on. If you enjoyed that video, do subscribe down below and check me out on other platforms, especially if you're on YouTube. I'm on BitChute, I'm on Brighteon, I'm on Rumble, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on all those places, and those links are down in the description. I'm also on Minds, Gab, and Getter. If you want to go check those out, once again, the links are down in the description. I suggest you do. I'm KelKidman, this has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.